So for us in Virginia, broadband is really an infrastructure issue, and being able to provide broadband access to every Virginian has taken top priority, and we are going to be spending close to $1 billion to make sure that we have that kind of access. So
right after Uvalde happened, I was expecting the president and the vice president to come out and talk about gun control right away. They couldn't even say the term. They couldn't even say it.
That I am not going to take a dime of corporate PAC money, no special interest money. And when we started this race, Dr. Khan, people said that you're not going to get anywhere with this approach. Guess what? We have proven them wrong.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Khanversations. Today, we have a very exciting episode. We are beginning the countdown to midterm elections. We are going to find out what our illustrious panel thinks about the prospects of Democrats. Will they be able to hold the Senate or the Congress or both, or face a much anticipated and expected defeat at the polls in November 2022? For those of you who are coming to Khanversations for the first time, you must have heard it on all YouTube channels. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the bell so that you get notifications about future videos that I post. Like the video and try and share it with your friends and colleagues and on your other networks. So let me quickly introduce you to our panel. We have with us Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who is the first Muslim woman to represent Virginia in the state Senate. She's from District 10. She's an academic. She's a PhD from Emory in English. And for more than 25 years, she has taught and administered in academia. We have with us Salam al-Marayati. Salam al-Marayati, the veteran of Muslim politics in America. He's the founder, president of Muslim Public Affairs Council. And he has been trying very hard, and successfully so, to bring Muslim issues and Muslim voices to the front and center of mainstream American politics. And we also have with us Junaid Ahmed, a young entrepreneur who is running for Congress from Illinois' 8th district. He is very progressive in his agenda. He's more progressive than the incumbent at the moment. And so he's providing a progressive challenge to Raja Krishnamurti, who is the current Democrat from Illinois' 8th district. So, as all of you know, that it has now become like an American political tradition that the president's party loses significantly in midterm elections. We were devastated when Obama lost both the House as well as the Senate in 2010. It completely put an end to his agenda. It was lucky that the so-called Obamacare was passed before that. And we continue to see the trend, and the expectations are that in 2022, the Democrats will lose significantly. I was looking at the Real Clear Politics, and Real Clear Politics predicts at the moment that in the Senate, the Democrats will hold on to 46 seats and Republicans 47, and there are 7 seats which are up for grabs. So it's quite possible that the Republicans could gain up to 2 seats in the Senate. But the House looks really, really very scary right now. It appears that the Democrats can surely hold only 180. They have 220 seats in the House. They might hold 180. Republicans, who have 209, might go up to 223. And 32 of the seats are seen as toss-up, which anybody could win. But of those 32, the toss-ups are 28 of them are Democrats. So it looks like that the Democrats could potentially lose anywhere between 20 to 60 seats in 2022. That would be devastating. Hillary Clinton recently observed that a loss this time, the way our country is poised and the huge differences between the two parties, a loss of both the Congress or even one of the houses would be devastating to the democratic agenda, human rights, and American democracy. So I'm going to start with Senator Ghazala Hashmi and ask you, what do you think are the key issues that are going to drive the election in 2022, and if there are any issues that could potentially save the Democrats?
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me to join the panel. And I can speak to what I am seeing in terms of what I hear from constituents in Virginia, and particularly in my district. I think predominantly in the minds of so many Americans are economic issues, of course, and that's because many American families, I know in Virginia, we are seeing families hurting from the disparities that have continued to take wealth and opportunity away from working class families. So we see families that are still trying to recover from the pandemic, the loss of income that was experienced during this crisis. The steep rise in gas prices has severely impacted so many families, and loss of economic opportunities. All of these are major concerns for so many Virginians, and I think those are the issues that people are looking for answers. And of course, the government is the chief area of focus right now. And so if we have a Democratic presidency and Democratic leadership, then people look for opportunities to find alternative solutions. So that is a vulnerable spot for us as Democrats, that we are not seeing in the kind of economic recovery that really help the families that need it the most. But I think, if we take a longer vision and a higher level view, we know that the economic crises that so many families are facing are not the result of democratic policies. They are that we're seeing a convergence of many issues. We're trying to recover from a global pandemic. We've got a war going on, major war going on in Eastern Europe. We have crises in supply chain issues. We have climate crisis. All of these areas are impacting the kind of economic concerns we are seeing. People want short-term solutions, but these issues are very complex, and they require us to think through policies that are going to make significant changes. And we've seen the Biden administration moving us in that direction, but we've seen the ways in which the Republican leadership continues to affect the recovery process, and the inability of Congress to take decisive and important action then has a ripple effect on what we're seeing in our congressional races this upcoming year.
Salam, how do you see the prospects of Democrats coming this fall?
Well, I think, as Senator Hashmi said, it does not look good because if there's an economic downturn, then the party in power in the White House, especially, is going to be the scapegoat, or they're going to blame them, and President Biden and Kamala Harris will be evaluated on leadership, and at this point, leadership their leadership numbers are down. Their overall approval rating is down. Kamala Harris has still yet to come out with any real impact on some of these issues. So that's the one thing. On the other hand, with the January 6th hearings, with some of the talk about reversing Roe v. Wade and compromising reproductive rights, there will be some people who will think twice about that. So, I'm not as sure about how bad it will be. Usually, as you said, Muqtedar, the party in power loses seats in midterm elections. So that's just an automatic. You are going to lose seats. And the problem from that is that you're not going to be able to push legislation. You're not going to be able to confirm your appointees. Delaware side has been waiting to get confirmed for the Small Business Council. Still, it's not happening. And if it doesn't happen by November, it's probably not going to happen. The act on the bill involving Islamophobia will probably not get through the Senate. So you're going to see a lot of legislation stall. But I think there's something even more basic and fundamental that we should be concerned about, and that's the rise of white nationalism and the conspiracy theory, the great white replacement theory, now injected into mainstream discourse. I think that is a more fundamental concern for all of us, because that could compromise our democracy and marginalize millions of Americans and scapegoat more immigrant communities, mainly people of color. So that is an issue that we need to be thinking about beyond, up to and beyond the elections, actually.
Junaid, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you have the primaries just around the corner and you've been running for canvassing all day long. But frankly, looking at the prospects of the Democrats, what do you think, even if you win the primary, how do you think you would do? And even though Illinois is quite a blue state, what do you think are the issues that the progressives can continue to push and still succeed in November? If you notice that on more than one occasion, the president has tried to distance himself from the progressive side of his party, especially on the issue of defunding the police, etc. And some people in the Democratic Party have tried to blame the progressive agenda as one of the reasons why the Democrats have such a bad public opinion polling this year around.
First off, Dr. Khan, thank you. Thank you for, I'm honored to be in this company here. We talked about inflation, and I think the entire nation, if not the entire globe, is experiencing inflation like at least I don't remember seeing it in my lifetime. So that is an issue. But beyond that, in the last, we started this campaign about 18 months ago, and in the last 6 months or so, when we aggressively started talking to a lot of people, spoken to thousands of people, and I tell you, beyond in the recent 2-3 months talking about gas prices and inflation, the one thing that has been consistent, and I would say over 90% of the people in different varying magnitudes are disappointed with our political system, are disappointed that, given hope that anything positive can even be accomplished. And the mistrust in politics, mistrust on politicians, it's very, very high where I live. In this district here, the congressman has been in office for 6 years. I mean, it's just not him alone. I think that mistrust in the political system, how people see the power is being taken away from people, and it's slowly shifting to the few billionaires that's out there, and how our political system is being bought out by special interests. That's a consistent message that we are hearing. Not just progressives or Democrats. That's the exact same message we're getting from Republicans. I mean, I was out in sun just about all day today. It's about close to 100 degrees. I don't even know. It felt really hot. And talking to everybody, even Republicans going into the polling booth, they have the same concern that we have these politicians who are not delivering. And I think to your earlier assessment about Democrats losing and the party losing, I think a big part of it is people are just tired. People are tired of not seeing any action by their elected officials, and in our district that's rampant, and people want to see someone who is willing to stand up and just say no to special interests, so say no to big PAC, corporation PACs, and just do what is right for the people.
You do point out to inflation, and that's true. Inflation, I checked today, is 8.6%. We have never seen that, and this is a historical high. In the past, like 10-15 years, it used to be 2, 3, and last year it was around 3 and 4 at the most, I think, at some point. So 8.6 is pretty high. Unfortunately, our president first called it transitory, and it is not going away. Then call it the Putin tax. That's not going away. And now we are trying to blame it on companies price gouging at the gas stations, etc. And honestly, I'm not very sure to what extent the president or this Congress, which is so divided, can really have an impact on the policies. We will see whether the feds will be able to control and they face this danger that in trying to control the inflation, they might introduce recession and take us into a recession. So that's a very fine line that the Feds will have to walk, and it will remain. We will know in November. But I do want to talk a little bit about President Biden's approval ratings. It has dipped nearly a year ago. It went below 50%. It is below what Donald Trump's used to be. And it is, and especially, I have a feeling that he's continuing to hedge whether he will run in 2024 or not, also is contributing to lower approval ratings of his. So to what extent will this 38% approval and 57% disapproval ratings of Biden, nearly 18, 19 percentage points apart, be a drag on the Democratic Party? I mean, are Democratic candidates going to try and distance themselves by the presidents by the time we are in September and October? And can a party whose leader is so unpopular at the moment actually help the party win? Let me share with you one scary fact. If we had elections today, Donald Trump would beat Joe Biden. That's what the polls say. But I remember the polls also saying that Hillary Clinton would win, and she did. So whatever the accuracy of the polls are, they are quite frightening, and they could have an impact on the Democrats' enthusiasm and Democratic turnout. If they think they're going to lose anyway, as it is, for people of color, voting is such a difficult task. It might discourage them from voting. I hope that I'm doing it, but I hope people talk less about the dim prospects of Democrats and discourage voters. So, Senator, what do you think? I know it's going to be very difficult for an elected Democrat to answer this question, but how do you think the Democrats are going to deal with President Biden's approval rating? Is he going to drag them down?
I don't know if it's all the shoulders of Joe Biden. Personally, I think he's doing a very effective job, but he comes into a White House that has been tarnished by its previous occupant, and the erosion of public trust that Junaid was speaking about is, I think, largely at the feet of the criminality of the Trump administration that we saw and that we're seeing, especially highlighted by these January 6th hearings. We have to, first of all, restore confidence, not just in our government, but also in the Constitution and on the integrity of the process that we have established in this country. And so when you have almost half of the American population still believing in the big lie or in some aspect of it, and other elected officials cynically continuing to spout that big lie and erode public trust in the electoral process, then that's a significant issue that we have to address. But as a Democrat, I think we need to embrace the issues and concerns that our voters have been always talking to us about. And that's where we build the enthusiasm for what we can do as a party. I know I hear from people who want to have common sense gun regulation, especially after the recent tragedies that we've seen. We can't run away from core issues that galvanize our voters. Focusing on the reproductive health access and equity for women is important. Focusing on those issues of economic and social justice is absolutely critical. Addressing issues of a criminal justice system that has unfairly targeted minorities. These are the concerns that my constituents are talking about. These are the issues that really, really engage voters. And rather than running away from them and not addressing them and trying to appease the far right voter, we need to identify, define, and demonstrate what we're going to be able to do on these critical topics. And that's what's going to be really important for Democratic voters to get energized about.
Yes, I think you're right, Senator. It's quite possible that the national trends could be misleading, and Democrats who are connecting better with their immediate constituents could actually do well in their constituency as opposed. And I hope that some of your colleagues are listening to what you're going to say. Salam, one of my Republican students asked me this question. He actually told me, make sure you ask your panelists this question, Dr. Khan. Now that America has moved away in the foreign policy arena from America first to Ukraine first foreign policy, how successful will that be at the polls for the Democrats? We seem to be more concerned about what's happening in Europe than what's happening right here at home. Even matters of security, for example, we are more concerned about security of Europe than security of our schools and primary schools and the lives of Americans, especially given the shootings in Uvalde and as well as in Buffalo, New York.
And my problem with the Democrats is they might be really good at governing, but they're terrible in terms of campaigning, and I think the gun control issue is Exhibit A. Right after Uvalde happened, I was expecting the president and the vice president to come out and talk about gun control right away. They couldn't even say the term. They couldn't even say it. I read their statements. The statement from President Biden was, we will lower our flags to half staff. Didn't say anything about gun control or gun violence until the next evening after apparently there was a temperature check and people said, oh, you need to say that. And so he finally mentioned it the day after. But people are looking for you right at that moment. That's the moment of leadership. And so he didn't do it. And the same thing with Kamala Harris. She was in front of all these elected officials, and she was stumbling, and she was talking about, I know who you are, and I know we all been working together, and we just need. And then I was ready to say, okay, great. She's going to talk about gun control. All she said was something like, we need effective public policy. I mean, so bland. And again, missed opportunity means actually less approval rating. I mean, it's more damage when that happens. So, I mean, all these issues are important that Senator Hashmi brought up: reproductive rights, healthcare access for everybody, especially women in these times, and people of color, for that matter, to have health equity, health security, gun control. There was a January 6th coup against our democracy. I mean, all these issues have to be put together in an effective campaign, and I just don't see anybody from the Democrats that is doing it. I don't see a Karl Rove on the Democratic side that is able to engineer issues and drive them to the voting booths and get people to the voting booths. At the end of the day, it's about who can get more people to vote. And unfortunately, the Republicans use fear, and it has worked for them. Remember when it was all about gay marriage, they used that as the fear tactic. And then it was the Sharia legislation. They used that as a fear tactic. And now it's the great white replacement theory. They're using that as a fear tactic. It's all done to drive their constituents to the polls. And the Democrats have to counter it, and I just don't see that coming from them.
Salam, you point out something very important, which is enthusiasm of voters, right? How do you get your voters out? There was a recent election in Texas, Ahmed, where I think for the first time in over 100 years, the seat had belonged to Democrats, and now it was reversed, and a Republican candidate won this special election. The voter turnout was really, really tiny. I went and checked in 2020, there were like 100,000 plus for both sides. And this election, the winner got like 14,000 votes, so roughly 10% of what the previous person got. So the voter turnout seems to be low. And it will be low in midterms because of the absence of the excitement with presidential elections. But Junaid, I mean, you pointed out that there is a lack of faith in the system. Congress, the approval rating of Congress is like 18 or 19%, broadly speaking. So people have completely lost faith in the Congress capacity, especially with the inability of the Democrats to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate and really move forward on the agenda on critical issues. So as you're campaigning out there, I mean, you have a population which is hurting economically. 40% of Americans say that the economy is the most important thing. But they also don't trust the people who are supposed to solve this problem, right? So in your conversations with these people, how are you trying to convince them that, look, if I'm in Congress, the Congress will be more effective? Like, how do you persuade them?
It's a unique situation in our constituency here. We have a representative who has, I believe, the number one money in the House as a candidate, almost $13 million, a big chunk of it coming from special interests. So in our district here, every conversation that I'm having with people is, Junaid, you seem to be a great guy. And I'm talking about the new Khanversations, right? The people who I'm talking for the first time. Those who know me from before, the activism background and everything and working with the homeless, it's a little bit of a different conversation, but I'm taking you to a brand new conversation. And they're like, I've heard everything right about you, but once you cross that line, you're going to be one of them. You're going to be taking that money. And that is, I think, the issue. They know, they trust you as a human being today. They trust that all this work that you have done your adult life, they're believing in you today. But then they know that once you cross that line, become that elected official, become that politician, you're going to be a sell-off. And that's what majority of the people, there is no exaggeration here. Just about every person who I am talking to for the first time says that, yes, you're a great guy. I know it. I've read about you. I know who you are. But once you cross the line, you're going to be one of them. I think that's a trust this nation has to build. This nation has to work hard. The Democrats have to work hard in building that trust. And we are starting that work here in the 8th District of Illinois. Inshallah, we will be contagious. We are going to show to the nation that people versus power, the big money power, people are going to come together here. I've taken a public pledge. The one thing to answer your question, Dr. Khan, is how am I addressing it? Where I'm saying, you know what? You're absolutely right. The guy before me did the same thing. Maybe the guy before that or the gal before that may have probably done the same thing. The one thing that we are going to do is we are taking a preemptive action here. And I'm taking a public pledge. I have already taken it, that I am not going to take a dime of corporate PAC money, no special interest money. And when we started this race, Dr. Khan, people said that you're not going to get anywhere with this approach. Guess what? We have proven them wrong. We have raised more money than all the other Republicans combined in this race. We have raised about $1.15 million from Grassroots, $50, $25, $1,000, $2,900. And people in this district are excited. They're excited. They're out. They're voting. Unfortunately, what we're dealing with is this issue of lack of interest, which we are trying to build at the grassroots level. But I think building that trust to us as a campaign is one of the most important things, that we can actually have honest representation, and that's what we're working on in this district.
When I talk about elections in my classroom, Junaid, I refer to it as auctions and not elections, given how much money is required to run for office these days. So we are soon going to have billion-dollar campaigns. I think we came very close last time, right? Because I think Trump was getting a lot of free advertisement from the media, which was covering him day and night. He didn't feel the need to raise that kind of money. But let me just tell you this. In the last midterm elections, the Democratic National Committee spent $30 million. This time, the Democratic National Committee for this midterm is planning to spend $70 to $77 million is what they plan to spend to defend their slight majority in the Congress and try to get an advantage in the Senate. So the amount of money that the Democrats are raising is stunning, in spite of the fact that there is perceptions that the Democrats may not do well that people are giving money, and clearly the money is coming from corporate interest, self-interest. But unfortunately, we are not even talking about campaign finance. If you remember, a few years ago, campaign finance used to be a major issue, at least when Senator John McCain was alive. There was a lot of talk about campaign finance, but we don't even hear that as a national issue. And so that brings me to this issue of culture wars. We are back into this world of culture wars. And Senator Hashmi, I want to ask you these things. There are two things that the Democrats are planning. I think if you've noticed the tension between the Department of Justice and the House committee, which is investigating what happened on January 6th, it is quite obvious that the Congress is planning to drop some September and October surprises in order to defend that's why they're not even releasing some of the entire transcripts to the Department of Justice. But it is also possible that the Supreme Court, which by now should have come out with their decision on women's rights and their freedom to have a say about their own body, basically on the Roe versus Wade issue, the more they delay, I think the closer it will get and energize the Democrats. So what are the chances that the culture war that the conservatives have been waging on women and people of color and others might actually help the Democrats to some extent, or will the Democrats flub it, or will they be able to weaponize it, so to speak? I don't want to use the words, but well, I've used it. Weaponize it for the midterms.
Well, I think we've already heard it addressed that Democrats are good at governance, but maybe not so much at messaging. And to some extent, that's true. But I think that's because we have a lot more to say about good policy, and we don't want to reduce it to 30-second sound bites. But culture wars have played a huge role. We've seen the far right and even mainstream Republicans using so many tactics to demonize particularly vulnerable communities. So whether it was Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or now homophobia, transphobia, all of the phobias. There were caravans at the southern border just the last election, and they magically disappear once the election is actually over. So the culture wars galvanize a certain segment of the population. They put fear into so many people. The latest assaults we are seeing, certainly we saw it in Virginia during this past governor's election, was focusing on public education, targeting and demonizing teachers, and making parents afraid to send their children to schools. The idea that schools are indoctrinating children caught hold in the minds of so many Virginians. So how do we respond to that? I think we focus on what really is at stake. And while the distractions of these culture wars take public attention away, we need to focus on what is going to truly harm the communities and the people that are the most vulnerable. So we're certainly seeing that in the targeted attacks on Roe v. Wade, on women's access to reproductive health and justice. We're seeing it in our the efforts to take away public education, adequate funding for public education and resources. We're seeing it in our targets on immigrant communities and other minority communities. And so when the issues that are really important impact families and the communities that we care about, we need to continue to highlight that. Housing is a serious problem here in Virginia, and I know across the country. Access to transportation, access to good employment opportunities. Those are the fundamental issues that impact and transform lives. And these culture wars are a distraction. They're also racist dog whistles for the most part. We need to talk about that, and we need to make sure that Americans understand what's really at stake. And to do that effectively, we really have to continue that messaging that's going to reach the average voter.
Senator, you brought up this issue of transportation and other facilities. The infrastructure bill, which was passed, there are now murmurs that because of inflation, the infrastructure bill cannot actually achieve what it was designed to do. So many states may not actually start the infrastructure projects because of the additional cost, because they don't know where the additional money is going to come, nearly 10% extra that will be spent. So it's quite possible that the infrastructure bill might not fully achieve. I mean, this is not just a Democrats' problem, because we'll realize this over the years. But how seriously do like in your discussions in the Senate and even within the party caucus, are American leaders worried about the fact that when it comes to trains, public transportation, etc., we are so lagging behind some of the developed world?
We are having a lot of those conversations here in Virginia, and being able to leverage not just federal dollars but also our state dollars to address those critical transportation needs is what we've been focused on, and being able to identify the projects that are the most urgent, that impact the greatest numbers of people, is the route that we're taking, and understanding that infrastructure is a whole host of issues. So for us in Virginia, broadband is really an infrastructure issue, and being able to provide broadband access to every Virginian has taken top priority, and we are going to be spending close to $1 billion to make sure that we have that kind of access. So when we're thinking about leveraging the dollars, we have to think about how every dollar has a significant impact on the most number of people in the most critical areas, and that will lead to greater economic growth and opportunity, especially in our rural communities. So those have been the key priorities that we've focused on now.
I want to move from the macro issues, Salam, to a small micro issue with our community. One of the things that startled me in the 2020 election was the exit polling of American Muslims suggested that 30% of American Muslims voted for Donald Trump. I have a colleague who does quantitative research, and he tells me that those polls are wrong, Muqtedar, don't trust those polls. But in the absence of any other polling, the exit polls consistently, both from Muslim sources and mainstream media, suggest that 30 to 33% of American Muslims voted for Donald Trump in 2020. And when asked why, they pointed to they gave two reasons. One, no new wars, so there were no major wars launched. And the second was the issue of LGBTQ issue. And so because of this fear of normalization, as they say, of LGBTQ culture, in fact, now they talk about it as if it's an ideology that is being promoted by people of alternate lifestyles. So that has become a big issue for people in the community. So do you think that similar issues might take out people who would otherwise vote progressive on economic issues because of some of these cultural issues? Either they will not vote in November, or they might actually vote Republican.
No, I think you're right. I think it's both. These so-called cultural issues, cultural wars, and number two, the economy. I think that because of the war in Ukraine, we didn't talk about the war in Ukraine, but I agree that it's odd that the United States is leading the charge against Russia for invading a country when the United States has invaded countries throughout the world. So it looks hypocritical now that they're making the Ukraine as the standard bearer of what the world should do in cases of naked aggression. I mean, you still have Palestine under occupation. You have Iraq that is in shambles after the U.S. invaded that country twice. Afghanistan is barely standing on its own 2 feet, and God knows, what's going to happen after, with the Taliban there. So Biden has not handled this war, and again, the messaging about this war in an effective way. People don't understand why we're there. All they think about is, okay, you want NATO to take over, and Russia is pushing back. This is what's going on in the minds of, people who don't study these issues very, very, in a granular way, but they see it as the United States getting involved in a geopolitical war with Russia over NATO. So that does not bode well for the Democrats in the upcoming elections. And when it comes to cultural issues, we have to face it. Even Latinos, who, many of them who are victims of Trump policies, they were supporting, I wouldn't say Trump, but they were supporting the Republicans because of issues like abortion, for example. So I believe that we have to come to terms with that, and either we say it's always going to be that way, about 30% is going to go in that direction because of social conservatism, and that's part of our community, or we come up with a better message, as the senator says, that we have to come up with better messaging, and for our community especially, I think on issues like LGBTQ issues, for example, it's about human dignity. It does not have to be about advocating or creating public policy on sexuality, because that is not something that Muslims are comfortable with, because in Islamic tradition, it was never part of public policy. And so we need to find that middle of the road approach, that you can be for the rights of the LGBTQ community, but you don't have to be advocating on behalf of the LGBTQ community. Can that happen? You can be you can be against abortion, but pro-choice. You can be for gun control and still defend the Second Amendment. I think that middle of the road approach can be a way of bringing back some of that 30% that you find in many of these minority communities who side with the Republicans because of social conservatism.
That's an interesting point. After all, the Ummah is supposed to be the community of the middle path, isn't it? Almost wasatiyah. So, brother, I'm going to start with Junaid. We have now coming close to the end of the program. So, what are your predictions? This is where you stick out your political necks. What are your predictions about November? Well, how do you think the Democrats are going to do? Will they hold half the Congress? Will they keep both the houses, or will it be a whitewash and a Republican wave, Junaid?
Dr. Khan, I'll share what I'm hearing. Right, as I've said earlier, people are extremely disappointed in many ways. I will not take a projection across the nation. I will just project for Illinois' 8th district. Inshallah, we're going to win. We are already, numbers are looking great for us. And we are going to carry this district in November as well. That's my projection. That's my prediction, and inshallah, we'll make it happen.
Well, I wish you all the best. What do you think, Senator Hashmi?
I think we shouldn't underestimate the kind of anger and the kind of enthusiasm that we are seeing from so many different groups at this point. The tragedies that we've seen with gun violence continue to be amplified. We've seen young folks marching and really advocating for stronger action. And they know that that kind of action is going to come from a Democratic majority, because we've seen the obstruction of Republicans on this issue and on so many issues. And so I think we should not underestimate the passion, especially the passion of young people and the passion of women. There are people who are ready to fight back against the kind of direction they've seen the Supreme Court taking us, Republican state legislatures taking us, and they're ready to be fully engaged. I think one thing positive that has come out, especially over the last 5 years, is a growing consciousness in American voters that state houses are so vital, and having folks in office at the state level, at the local level, is absolutely critical, most especially also in protecting the integrity of the ballot. And so I think we're going to see voters galvanized. We may lose seats. I can't make any predictions, but I know in Virginia people are very ready to vote, and they're quite enthusiastic.
Well, that's a very interesting assessment. What about you, Salam? What do you think?
I'm not as optimistic. But you know, at the reality, I mean, I don't know, my opinion, I guess, not a reality. Pluralistic democracy is the future of America. There's no way going around that. We are multicultural, multi-faith, and and you know, of different political persuasions. That's the greatness of America, is e pluribus unum. From many we are one, and there's opportunity for everyone and anyone in America. That is what makes America distinctive from any other country, is that it doesn't matter where you come from, you have an opportunity. Junaid is running for Congress. Senator Ghazala Hashmi is a sitting senator in a great state legislature. So we have opportunity in America. That is what we should tap into. And I always believe in counter narratives. So if there's this narrative of a great white replacement conspiracy theory on the right, we must come with the great enrichment theory, that because of our differences, America has grown the pie for all Americans. There are more jobs. There is a greater intellectual bank in America because of people like Dr. Muqtedar Khan, for example, who are teaching the best and brightest of our students. And so we're leveraging that. There are great Muslim scientists who helped in the pandemic, as another example. So people of all backgrounds have contributed to America. That is the message that I expect the president and the vice president to be talking about between now and the elections, as the counter to this idea that, you know, white people are being replaced and there's a genocide against them in Europe and now spilling over here to the United States that led to the massacre of places like Buffalo and Charleston and the shooting in Pittsburgh and Poway. Somebody needs to connect these dots and create that narrative. If that is to be done, then I'm a little more hopeful.
Well, I want to thank all the guests, but I want to also tell our listeners that this was the first of the countdowns to midterms. In a few weeks, I will be bringing you a panel of senators from the state of Delaware, and we will also have Republican senators participating in that discussion on how the midterm elections are going to shape the politics of this country. I think this one is going to be a far more critical midterm election than the ones that we have had in the past. For those of you who are keen to support Junaid and Senator Hashmi's campaigns, I have links below in the video description to both their campaigns and their websites, so please go and support. I will also have a link to the Muslim Public Affairs Council, of which Salam al-Marayati is the president, so you can go and learn about the work they do and also give your support to all of them. And talking about support, please support Khanversations, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and also make sure that you share this video with your friends, colleagues, and networks. And once again, thank you to my distinguished panels. I'm extremely obliged that you gave me your thoughts and your time. And until next time, please remain happy and thoughtful and remain engaged in the politics of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.